welcome to the 26th episode of the Backpacking Cycle. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about the journey that you must embark on to overcome social anxiety. And I'm going to kind of use the hero's journey as described by Joseph Campbell as a metaphor to how you can utilize that sort of progress to overcome social anxiety. And if you don't go on this journey, if you choose to seclude yourself and sit in inaction, your insecurities and your anxieties are only going to get worse. You're not going to ever escape the way you're feeling now, or you're not going to be able to get to a place where you're confident and you're able to socialize and speak to women, speak to people without embarking on this journey where you go down into the depths of your insecurity and you tackle face first and head on what it is that is holding you back. So this journey is a long process of pushing yourself out your comfort zone, self-acceptance, and just continuously and persistently heading towards something that maybe scares you a little bit and maybe does instill a little bit of fear, but it's the only way through it. You can't think your way out of this problem. You can't wish your way out of this problem. These problems aren't going to go away on their own. The only way you're going to overcome your neurosis, your anxiety, is to tackle it head on, is to have self-acceptance, is to realize where it is coming from, and then to move in that direction of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and doing the thing you must do, that you know deep down that you have to do to overcome this mental illness. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting episode, and I've embarked on my own hero's journey myself, where I was completely socially anxious, as you would have known from the last episode, and I've took steps and instilled habits and pushed myself out of my comfort zone, and I've got to a place where I'm relatively confident. I'm happy with who I am. I'm very self-acceptance. I'm happy to talk about my insecurities, my anxieties, and I can see a path where I can keep on improving and become this confident, idealistic version of myself. That this idealistic version itself is constantly improving. So I'm never going to reach a point where I can't improve, but I am now on this progression where I'm constantly improving and I'm constantly getting more confident, just because I embarked on this hero's journey. I embarked on the journey to overcome social anxiety. So let's get into the episode. So there's two things that I want you to understand, two concepts, right? Overcoming social anxiety. You've got external work and internal work. And both of these are correlated. They intertwine with each other, but there's two distinct kind of ways you can go around overcoming social anxiety and two methods that people use. So first, people say that to overcome social anxiety, you just need to push yourself out your comfort zone. You just need to go and speak to people, expose yourself to the scenarios that make you anxious. And this is amazing advice, and this is part of cognitive behavioral therapy, where they expose you to what you think you are afraid of or what you actually are afraid of. When you expose yourself to these scenarios, your brain starts to interpret that it's not actually that bad. You go into a social situation, and before you've got all these ideas of if I go into this social situation, people are going to think I'm so weird and it's going to go so wrong, and you seclude yourself because you're so stuck in your head that you can't socialize. But as soon as you go into that social situation, even if you don't perform to the best of your ability, even if you do act a little bit anxious, your brain realizes that, whoa, I can do that, and I did this well and I did this wrong, and you give yourself a path to improve. And by exposing yourself to these scenarios, it's just training your brain to realize that these scenarios aren't as heavy and aren't as fearful as you think they are. So there's the first kind of conception that you can follow. You can rather just go all external, or the next one is internal, and this is a very tricky one. It's very nuanced, and there's so many different ways you can tackle the internal work, but this is more going inwards and finding out where is this anxiety coming from? Why do I have anxiety in this situation? This is building the awareness to understand where your anxiety triggers and why it triggers, and maybe going back and speaking to your younger self and challenging the beliefs that you hold around certain scenarios and certain environments. And a lot of people ignore this or choose to just go outwards, and they put all of their self-worth and all of their progress on what's happening outside of them, when really everything external is just an interpretation of our own minds. So the internal actually interprets the external. And if you don't take time to understand what's happening in your mind, if you don't dive deep into the depths of your subconscious and find out what beliefs and frameworks you hold about yourself and the world around you, if you don't spend time observing the nature of your own mind and the mechanics of how it works, then you're really cutting yourself short, and you're never actually truly sure if the external work is going to benefit you or not. So what a lot of people do, I think, that have anxiety or have confidence issues, is they build this persona on top of their or on top of the persona that's already anxious. So you've got a thing called your persona, which is how people perceive you. It's your outward perception. It's what you show to people, and it gets filtered through your ego, right? So your ego's there filtering if things are coming up from your subconscious and your conscious, and they're getting filtered through your ego to get onto your persona, and your persona is what the other people see. It's what your work colleagues think of you, what your family think of you, what your friends think of you, what your girlfriend thinks of you, your boyfriend, whatever it may be. That is your persona. And what people often do is they create a second persona just to deal with their insecurities and anxieties, and to deal with social situations. So let's say you expose yourself to enough social situations where you're very anxious to go into a group of friends and talk, or you're very anxious to go and speak to women. But by exposing yourself to these scenarios, you get good at the cues that make you outwardly look confident. And by this, you get better at dealing with them scenarios. But on the inside, you're still very anxious, and you still don't have the confidence or self-acceptance. So what you do is you build an extra ego, you build an extra persona on top of what you already are. And so you're good at dealing with these certain scenarios, and you're better at now speaking to women on the outside. But as soon as you go to the bathroom, as soon as you look at yourself in the mirror, it's the same you, and you don't realize how much you're suppressing your anxieties and your insecurities. And instead of dealing with them head on, what you're doing is you're suppressing them and creating this concrete persona on top. And this is going to be a problem, because the more you act out this persona, the more you fulfill the outward exposure of I'm this person that's confident, the more you're going to get disconnected between who you actually are, and you're never going to be able to be vulnerable with people and make deep connections. And you might outwardly look confident, and you might not look like you have anxiety, but what you're going to do is you're going to create this disconnect between yourself and the people around you, and you're never going to find true happiness or fulfillment, and you're never going to find deep connection with people. So you see this a lot in pickup artists. What pickup artists do is they're normally people who really struggle with women, and they really struggle with the dating market. And what they do is they go to the other end, they go to the extreme and try and trick women into sleeping with them. And they build this outward persona where they act like this person just to get women to sleep with them. And that's what you can do in similar scenarios with social situations. You can create this outward persona just to trick people that you are confident and that you are liked, or you're not anxious. So yeah, the internal work is just as, maybe even more important than the outwards. And you should always look internal as well as what's happening out there. So one thing I want to say before we get into this whole journey, and obviously that is part of the journey, it's realizing that you are both mind and matter. Everything out there and everything in here is all the same. We are all part of one, and you need to deal with both in a dualistic way. But also, these negative emotions that come up, this anxiety, the depression, whatever it is, can be used as a signal that something needs to change. So how I often see anxiety now is different to how I used to see it. And I think when I get anxiety in situations now, it's often a signal to me that something needs to change, that I'm not living in a manner that is enriching and fulfilling to me. And I'm kind of living this disconnect between the person I want to be and the person I'm acting out. So when you get anxiety, or when you get depression, whatever it may be, treat that as, right, this is a signal that something needs to change. My authentic self is screaming out to me here going, you are not living with your purpose. You are not living as you are. You're not being authentic. You are pretending. You are missing out on something. And a lot of the signals from anxiety can be, you're just not meeting your basic human needs. You're not having an enriching social life. You're not progressing towards a purpose that makes you feel happy and confident and driven. You're not looking after your body. You're not happy with your job. Anxiety is normally it's kind of a signal that something's going wrong and something needs to change. So treat this anxiety with kind of gratitude, instead of looking at your social anxiety it inhibits me from doing things, it stops me from doing what I want to do. What you want to do is you want to realize that it is actually something that's going to allow you to live a better life. It's an indicator that, look, you're not going down an enriching and fulfilling path right now, and you need to change. The social situations that you're getting in, you actually deep down want to be good socially. You want to have the relationships with the people. You want to have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, you want to have an enriching dating life, but you're suppressing yourself and you're hiding in fear and you're not doing that. So this anxiety is coming out saying, look, you need to go and face these insecurities, because on the other side of that anxiety is a better path to live. It's a way where you can live where you are enriched and fulfilled and you're living your dream life. You are reaching to the idealistic version of yourself. You're becoming the person you want. So anxiety is just a signal. Stop letting it dictate you and use it as, right, this is a signal that something needs to change. The real me is screaming out for me to be authentic. The next thing is, like, if you keep choosing to ignore anxiety, and this pretty much links back to what I said before, like the more you choose to ignore anxiety, the worse it's going to get. And this is a bit of a path that I got stuck in, like this anxiety thought loop where you get comfortable by sitting at home and doing nothing and sitting in inaction, because by sitting in inaction, you don't have to deal with your fears. And the more you sit in inaction, like the more comfortable you get just ignoring your fears. But in reality, what happens is this anxiety builds up and builds up and builds up. So when you're at home, you're fine, you're safe, you're comfortable. But as happens in reality, inevitably, you have to go out into the real world. And then you might run into a social situation. And because you've secluded yourself, because you've ignored and suppressed all your anxieties, they're going to get worse. They're going to be more fueled, they're going to be more suppressed, and when they come out, they're going to flare up even more. So your anxiety actually gets worse by doing nothing. So it's not an option to sit at home and just hide yourself, or to avoid the dating market altogether, or to avoid social situations. You cannot do that, because the longer you do this, the more you're going to reinforce the habit of you being someone who sits at home and ignores their anxiety, and then you get stuck in that loop of just constantly ignoring your anxiety. So you need to embark on this journey and go and tackle your fears, because the more to the degree that you ignore your anxiety, it determines how much it impacts you. So yeah, like you need to face up to your anxiety. You need to realize that, like, the longer I sit inside, the worse it's going to get. And I did this for years. I remember just sitting in my room, and like even my grandparents would come home and I wouldn't go downstairs to say hello to them because I was so socially anxious, and I never used to go out with friends. I always used to make excuses. And the more I did this, the more my anxiety got worse. The more I became depressed and like I was suppressing all these emotions, the more my self-esteem got beat up, and the more I like performed worse in social situations, and the more my anxiety flared up. So yeah, please don't just sit at home and don't like just give in to your anxiety, because there you're actually being cowardice. And I know that's difficult for you to hear, but the more you ignore your anxieties, you're just being a coward. And anxiety can be hard to deal with. Social anxiety can be crippling. And I know how you feel right now if you're experiencing it, but you have to go down and slay that dragon. You need to go down deep and see where it's coming from and tackle it head on, because nothing's going to change. If anything, that dragon is just going to grow and get more fierce. So you need to go down and slay that dragon. You need to go and battle with what is causing your social anxiety, because the longer you leave it, the more anxious you're going to get, the worse your life is going to get. So now we know that, like, the next stage for you to do, like the first stage really is for you to become aware of your social anxiety. You need to have an understanding of how your anxiety gets triggered, where it's getting triggered from, what scenarios what scenarios bring up this anxiety. And a good way to do this is just start journaling. So what I would often do is I would get a journal and I would just do some deep journaling, and I would sit there and I would like speak to myself as a third person. So I would detach myself away from me, and it's like I would speak to the younger version of myself, or I'd speak to myself, and I would just be like, why did you get anxious in this situation? So let's say you went to the gym today and you seen a pretty girl, or let's say you seen someone at work and you got anxiety. Whatever flared your anxiety up today, what I want you to do is, as soon as that happened, I want you to sit down and ask why. So you want to do some like cognitive behavioral therapy on yourself. You want to really get down deep and go, what is causing me to be anxious? Why did I get anxiety in that situation? And then you want to reply as a different person. So you're the conscious you asking you, why you got anxious, and you want to have this back and forth conversation. So what I would often do is like, I'd be like, why did I get anxious talking to this girl? And then I'd come up with some reason, like, because I thought she thinks I'm weird. And then I would ask, like, why do you think that she thinks you're weird? And just keep asking yourself why, and keep digging into these like rationalizations you come up with, and these excuses and these answers. And the more you do this, the more you ask yourself why, the better you're going to understand how the beliefs in your mind and how the framework of your thinking causes you anxiety and the way you actually see the world. Because what I often think is, like, we don't act out what we think. No, we act out what we think, not what we say. So we can say and intellectually know that, right, I should just go and speak to that woman and not be embarrassed. But when you act it out in reality, you get this anxiety comes, you get sweaty palms, a brain fog. And this is because somewhere deep inside of you, some part of a sub-personality, whether that's like an anxious version of yourself, a younger version of yourself, has this belief that you can't speak to women, or you can't be good in social situations, that you're someone who's socially anxious. And that sub-personality, that part of you, has formed that belief from your experiences, and it's interpreted your experience in a way that you are someone who's anxious, you are someone that's depressed, you are someone who can't socialize. So you need to dig down into why this part of you thinks that you are anxious, why this part of you thinks that you're afraid. And by doing this, by journaling and constantly asking why, all you're doing is becoming aware of where your anxiety is stemming from, what framework of thinking is causing this anxiety. So it's kind of a little version of cognitive behavioral therapy that I do, where like you really just get clear of what your framework of thinking is and why you think you're anxious. What beliefs do you hold about certain scenarios, about certain people? And by that, you're building the awareness, and you can't solve anxiety until you're aware. It's like any problem. Say if you have a problem in business, say if you have a problem with your health, until you're aware of that problem, until you know that there's a problem, you can't solve the problem. So you need to delve deep into your anxiety and realize where it's coming from. Another good way to do this is a lot of meditation. So the more you meditate and the more you contemplate, the better you're going to get at realizing and understanding when anxiety comes up. And with meditation as well, like when the anxiety comes up, when social anxiety arises, you can kind of detach yourself away from the feelings. Not fully, but you can observe the feelings. You can go and take action instead of like giving into the anxiety. Instead of actually attaching to the feeling of anxiety, you can realize that I'm someone here and the anxiety is there, and I'm going to speak to that person regardless if this anxiety is in my body or not. So like meditation is another massive tool to build awareness, and this is going to help you again with your journaling, with you realizing when anxiety comes up, and then you can do a deeper inquisitive dive into what is causing my anxiety. And when you start doing this, it's really cool, right? So the way cognitive behavioral therapy works, I should probably explain this, is you have like core beliefs about you and the world around you. And these beliefs are formed by your past experiences, by, like, as I said before, like sub-personalities that live in your brain. And the more you question these beliefs, the more you get, and out of these beliefs, come automatic negative thoughts. So you have all these thoughts coming in your brain all day, every day. We have like hundreds of millions of thoughts a day, right? I don't know how many thoughts, countless, endless, infinite amount of thoughts, right? And all of these are stemming from somewhere. They're stemming from beliefs in our brain. So what you want to do is you want to like chop through these automatic negative thoughts. You want to see what automatic negative thoughts you have and start questioning them thoughts. And the more you start questioning them thoughts, you'll get down to a core belief you have about yourself or the world around you. And that belief is what is interpreting and causing your anxiety. It's what's causing you to see the world as you see it. But it gets a bit more complex than that as well, which I'm going to discuss later with like sub-personalities and the way like Carl Jung used to see the mind, which is really interesting. But for now, like, yeah, really like journal about yourself and be inquisitive about who you are and why you think things about the world around you. So another thing I like to do is when I go into social situations and when I go into places where I'm a little bit nervous, I'm a little bit anxious, like before I rather go into there or after, I get the notes app up on my phone and then I write down everything that's in my mind. I kind of like just splurge my mind onto the notes app. And it's really interesting to go like, why am I anxious? And then I'll write this massive paragraph because this person's in there. I'm going to see this person I know from school, blah, blah, blah. And then once you've splurged all that information out there, then you can ask yourself why again, and you can see how your mind's operating in its prime form of anxiety. You're not reflecting of a time when you was anxious. You are anxious right now, and you're going to see how your brain operates. Because when you're like mindless and you're just going into these situations anxious, you're not aware of how you're thinking. It's that awareness again. But when you can sit down and just take a few minutes to get your notes app up and really write what's happening in your brain, you're going to get a true realization of how your brain sees this scenario, and you really see like how conflicted it is and how it's not actually seeing reality for what it is. It's just seeing reality for its base biases that it's been grown up to see the world as. So there's another little like tip I like to do. Exposure and just keep exposing yourself as well, man. Like, it's so important. I'm not really sure if the structure of this podcast is going too well. I'd love to know some feedback from people. I had loads of notes, but I've kind of just gone on a massive tangent and just saying things in ways that I think flows nice. So yeah, let me know if this makes any sense, people. I'm going to post it anyway. But if anyone doesn't like it, just let me know, and next time I'll make sure it's a lot more structured. Yeah, so make sure you're just pushing yourself out your comfort zone as well, because like one thing you're going to do is, if you're doing the internal work and the external work, you are going to be reinforcing that these beliefs you have about yourself are faulty. So once you get aware of these beliefs and you've done the internal work, you've done the journaling, you've done the meditating, you've spoke to your younger self, you've accepted your younger self, you understand why he thinks like he does, what faults he has. When you go out into external environments now, you're going to see patterns of thoughts and behaviors that come up, and you're going to realize how faulty these are, and you're going to put them out into the real world, and you're going to expose yourself to a scenario where you realize that, right, this version of me that's living in my brain that is anxious, seeing the world as this social situation is the end of the world, and I've just gone into this social situation and it wasn't actually that bad. There you are. You're giving your brain evidence that this is a faulty way of thinking, and you're dissolving away this belief bit by bit, and keep exposing yourself with the internal work. That is going to be your number one way to overcome social anxiety. And these two together are going to propel you to a state where you are so confident, and it won't actually take that long if you are just proactive about it. If you just take the initiative and go out and do the internal work, spend time in solitude, understand and accept yourself, but also push yourself out your comfort zone at the same time. And another way I like to see for like internal work, how Carl Jung sees the mind, which is really interesting, right? So for those who don't know who Carl Jung is, he is a Swiss psychologist. He passed away years and years ago, but he is like one of the forefounders of psychology and psychoanalysis, which is like a different way of seeing the mind. And he's seen the mind, right, as, right, we are living beings. So he's seen it as the fact that we're living, it would make sense that we are made of subcomponents that are living as well. And he called these like archetypes. He was like, you have sub-personalities in your brain, like models of being in your brain that are constantly fighting to have effects on who you are as a person. So let's say, for example, you have a version of you that gets hungry, you have a version of you that gets anxious, you have a version of you that gets angry, and depending on what's happening outside, this version of you takes place in your mind. So that's like when you're hungry, you see the world through the eyes of someone who is hungry. When you're anxious, you see the world from the eyes of someone who is anxious. So what Carl Jung recommends doing is going down and like playing with these personalities, is understanding these personalities and really integrating them into your personality and finding out why they think like they do. And that is going back to like CBT, what I was talking about before with the deep journaling. Like, you want to mess around with these personalities and you want to integrate them into your life and not suppress them, and go down and think, why does the anxious version of me, why does this anxious personality think like that? Was it a past experience? Was it a trauma he had in his childhood? What is causing him to think like that? And the more you can do this, the more you can dig down and understand this part of you. Why is he thinking like that? The more you can integrate a more matured version of that person, the more you can deal with that personality's problems and bring it to more aligned with who you actually are. Because at the core, I think there is like this version of us that is pure authenticity, and then we've got all these personalities that sprout off that like suppress this pure authenticity. So you just got to deal with these personalities, and these personalities are what are causing your anxiety there. Yeah, and the more you integrate these and the more you understand them and the more you push them out your comfort zone, the better it's going to be. So it's just important you embark on this journey and you tackle it head on. And like a good thing that I always talk about in these podcasts, but really does help, is just to like define what your life wants to be like and what it will be like if you carry on with this neurosis, if you like continue to be cowardice and give into your anxieties. What will your life look like? And what will it look like if you overcome your anxiety? What is life going to look like once you get to a point where you are happy and fulfilled and you're confident? And like define these two, because then you're going to give yourself a bigger purpose. You're going to give yourself a reason to act. And often, like when we look at what we're going to be if we give into our insecurities, it enrages us, it gives us fear, and you can utilize that fear to action. You can use that fear to overcome your anxiety. You can be like, I don't want to be like that person, but I want to be like the version of me that's confident. And like that neurosis you're feeling, the anxiety you're feeling, could just be used as an indicator again. It can just be like, look, I need to act now because I need to get here. And the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Like the stuff that you're afraid of, all the insecurities you have, that is the fuel you need to live the life you want to be. That treasure that's hiding in that cave of your insecurities is the dream life you want to have. It's the person you're going to be once you're confident, once you're in a relationship, once you're happy, whatever it is, whatever you desire that you can't get there now because you're socially anxious. That cave is holding that, and you need to dive into that cave and slay what's ever in there, and you need to get down to that treasure and realize that the true you, the life that you want to live, is just around the corner. It's there for you to achieve and grab. You just need to have the courage to go down and slay it. And that's the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell. It's like we all have our insecurities and we all have our anxieties, but the only way we're ever going to overcome these is by facing them head on, is by equipping some sort of weapon, equipping some sort of tool, and going in there and having courage and being brave and going and fighting the demons and fighting the dragon that like lays deep in that dungeon and that cave. And you just need to do it. And it's tough, it's tricky, but you learn so much in the process. You don't just become confident, but you build resilient. It gives you purpose, it gives you drive. And if you're looking for like purpose in your life, if you're really stuck and like you're so consumed by anxiety, depression, look at your insecurities. That can be the passion you need. Like you don't need to find a passion. There's no external thing that you need. Everything's in your mind. You can use your insecurities as an ideal passion for you. It can be your purpose to overcome that thing, and like that is all the fuel you need to go and live a purposeful life. You just need to go down into your insecurities and face them head on. And if you really look at it, that's more difficult than anything else. People can become millionaires, can get shredded and get a six-pack, right? That is achievable. It's so easily achievable. What isn't as achievable is facing your largest demons, is like dealing with your childhood traumas, is doing the things that completely scare you. And they're the harder things. And people use materialistic goals. They use all the external environment as a distraction away from their own mind. Like the people that get obsessive about becoming billionaires and want to achieve that are often ran by insecurity, and their state of mind is something that you would not want to have. So on a tangent, like don't always focus on people's material goals or what their life looks like, because it is often fueled by anxiety and depression, and you wouldn't want their state of mind. But if you can conquer your fears, if you can go into the cave and find the treasure, then you are going to be well equipped to get whatever you want in your life, because you're not going to be held by insecurities. You're going to live a life of stillness and peace, because you're going to be self-acceptant. You're going to accept who you are as a person, and yeah, you're going to find purpose and peace, and everything in life is going to get better. So don't give in to these insecurities and anxieties, people. Like, they're hard. You need to define what they are, define a plan to deal with them, and you just need to tackle it head forward. And that is your hero's journey. You can be the guy, you can be the girl that overcame social anxiety. I'm on that journey. Many people have completed that journey. We're all in this fucking insecurity-filled minds that we've just got to battle with. But it's a process. So thank you very much for listening, people. That's everything I have to say about the about overcoming social anxiety and going on your own little journey. The next episode is going to be about health and how your health impacts social anxiety. So I think that'll be a really interesting episode. But yeah, I appreciate you all listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode.